Look at her. Barely 100 pounds, Grant told the backyard barbecue, dragging Taryn onto the mat. I'll go easy, sweetheart. You're just somebody's mom. Maris laughed, try not to chip a nail. 7 seconds later, he was face down. Mateo froze by the cooler. She's tactical response. Back off. Grant's hand closed around my wrist before I could set down my lemonade. Come on, Taryn, my brother-in-law called across his backyard. Do not make this weird. I said I'll go easy on you. 46 people were watching. My sister Maris laughed beside the cooler. Try not to chip a nail. Grant pulled me toward the grappling mat like I was part of the entertainment he had planned for his own barbecue. I looked at his hand around my wrist. Then I looked at the mat. I did not pull away. Not yet. My name is Taryn Bellamy. I was 42 years old that afternoon, and I had spent most of my adult life learning how to stay calm when people around me were losing control. My family did not know that. They knew I lived in a small house in North Harbor with my daughter, Lark. They knew I worked in corporate safety. They knew I drove an old gray SUV, packed school lunches before sunrise, and showed up to family events with dessert in one hand and a polite excuse ready in the other. They thought I was soft. They thought I was quiet because I had nothing worth saying. Grant was only the latest person to believe it. The strange part was that I had taught them to. Before Grant, before Maris married a man who needed every room to orbit around him, there was my father's garage in Port Linden. It sat behind our old house, a square cinderblock building with a rusted metal door and one narrow window that barely opened. My father repaired farm machinery there. Tractors, harvesters, diesel pumps, anything with an engine that had stopped working at the worst possible time. The garage always smelled the same. Oil, coffee, cold concrete, burnt metal. When I was 8, my father began taking me with him on Saturdays. My mother said she needed somebody to keep me out from underfoot while she handled Maris and the house. My father never made a speech about it. He would point at a wrench. Pass me that one. I learned to tell the difference between the sizes before I could explain fractions. I learned that bolts stripped when you rushed them. I learned that some parts had to be held steady for a long time while someone else did the harder-looking work. My father, Owen Bellamy, had large hands and black oil stains that never fully left the lines in his skin. He did not talk much when he worked. He listened to engines. He listened to silence, too. One winter morning, I held a flashlight while he leaned inside the open side panel of a combine. The wind cut through the cracked garage door. My fingers were numb, but I kept the beam steady. After a while, he looked over at me. You cold, kid? A little. You want to go inside? I shook my head. He gave one short nod and went back to work. That was the kind of approval I grew up chasing. At home, Maris had a different kind. She was 3 years younger than me and bright in every way I was not. She sang at school events. She remembered birthdays. She knew how to make grown-ups laugh without trying too hard. When relatives came over, Maris was the child they asked to perform. Sing that song for Aunt June. Show Uncle Ray your dance. Tell them what happened at school. The room always turned toward her. I never blamed Maris for that. She was good at being seen. She liked people, and people liked being around her. I was the one who disappeared into the edges. By the time I was 18, everyone in the family had accepted the arrangement without ever saying it out loud. Maris was the bright daughter. I was the quiet one. The day I told them I had applied for a federal tactical response training program, my mother was standing at the kitchen counter peeling potatoes. She stopped halfway through one. You want to do what? I passed the first screening, I said. The training starts in July. My mother set the peeler down. Taryn, that is not a normal job. You have no idea what kind of people you will be around. I know enough. Maris was sitting at the table with a mug of tea between her hands. She looked at me with that familiar mix of concern and impatience. There she goes again, she said. Taryn is always running off somewhere instead of just building a life. I remember the sound of the refrigerator humming behind us. I remember the potatoes in the sink. I remember wanting to explain myself. I wanted to tell them I was not running away. I was moving towards something I had already felt in my bones. But my father came in through the back door before I could say anything. He had been outside checking the truck. My mother looked at him. Talk to her. He looked at me instead. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then he crossed the kitchen and placed one oil-stained hand on my shoulder. The hard jobs still count, kid, he said. Even when nobody asks who did them. That was all. My mother went back to peeling potatoes. Maris looked down at her tea. And I carried those words with me for the next 24 years. At first, they made me feel understood. Later, they gave me a reason to stay hidden. I thought silence was something my father had taught me. I did not understand that I had turned it into something else. By the time Grant dragged me toward that mat, silence was no longer a shelter. It was the cage I had built around myself. And he had no idea what he was about to step into. My family thought I worked in corporate safety compliance. That was the phrase Maris used when someone asked what I did. Taryn handles safety stuff, she would say. You know, policies, inspections, paperwork. Then she would usually smile in a way that suggested she had already explained more than necessary. I let her. At family dinners, people asked Grant about training, deployments, and the kind of pressure that made them lean forward in their chairs. When someone finally turned to me, the question was usually casual. So, are you still doing office safety? I would nod. Something like that. That answer was easy. It ended the conversation before it started. The truth had too many locked doors in it. For almost 24 years, I had worked in tactical response. My official title changed over time. My responsibilities changed too. There were years when I trained teams. There were years when I worked protective details. There were nights when I helped move witnesses before someone dangerous could find them. There were operations where every instruction came through an earpiece, quiet and precise. There were rooms where nobody raised their voice because everyone understood what panic could cost. I learned how to read a hallway before entering it. I learned how to spot fear hiding behind anger. I learned that the loudest person in a room was rarely the one you needed to worry about most. I also learned not to bring any of it home. At first, that was not a choice. It was part of the job. There were reports I could not discuss. There were locations I could not mention. There were people whose names belonged in sealed files, not family stories. Then, over time, I used those restrictions as cover. I could not tell them everything. So I told them nothing. Nobody pushed very hard. My family had already decided what I was. A quiet woman with a steady job. A single mother who took safety seriously. The person who remembered allergy labels, kept spare batteries in her car, and brought enough food for everyone. There was relief in being underestimated. Nobody asked me to explain the parts of my life that still followed me home in my sleep. By the time I got home most nights, I wanted simple things. I wanted to make lark pasta with too much Parmesan. I wanted to help her with spelling words. I wanted to hear about who got in trouble at school and why her teacher had assigned a science project involving a shoebox. I did not want to tell my 6-year-old daughter that her mother knew how to clear a room before she knew how to relax inside one. So I became the version of myself that fit inside our little house in North Harbor. The house was not fancy. It had pale blue siding, a narrow front porch, and a kitchen that always smelled faintly like coffee because I made too much every morning. Lark's drawings covered the refrigerator. Most of them had rainbows, cats, and people with oversized smiles. In every picture, I wore a skirt. I had not worn a skirt to work in years. One evening, Lark sat at the kitchen table with her math workbook open between us. Her tongue pressed against the corner of her mouth while she counted on her fingers. "Mom," she said, "what do you do at your office?" I looked up from the page. "Safety work." She frowned. "Like making sure nobody gets hurt?" "That is part of it." "Do you tell people where the fire exits are?" "Sometimes." She seemed satisfied with that answer. Then she went back to her numbers. I watched her small hand move across the page and something tightened in my chest. She knew I packed snacks. She knew I could braid her hair when she sat still long enough. She knew I made grilled cheese when she was sick and slept beside her when she had nightmares. But she did not know all of me. Not because she was too young. Because I had made being unknown feel safer than being seen. After my father died, that habit became useful in a different way. Owen had been gone less than a year when my mother's medical bills started piling up. The insurance company rejected one claim, then another. Her rent increased that same winter. She never asked directly for help. Nadine had too much pride for that. She would call and say things like, "I am figuring it out," even when I could hear unopened mail sliding across her counter. I knew what those envelopes were. I knew because I had seen the return addresses. So I helped. I set up automatic transfers from a separate account. I paid a prescription balance one month, then part of her rent the next. When a treatment bill landed, I covered what insurance did not. Over 4 years, there were 38 transfers. None of them carried my name in the memo line. I made sure of that. One night, after Lark was asleep, I sat alone at my kitchen counter with the bank app open. The blue light from the screen made my hands look pale. The refrigerator clicked on behind me, then hummed softly in the quiet. I approved another payment. Then I watched the confirmation appear. Completed. That was all I needed. I was present in every emergency. I just made sure nobody knew where the help came from. My mother told her friends she managed on her own. Maris believed it. Grant definitely believed it. I let them all keep that story because it made things easier. Nadine did not have to feel indebted. Maris did not have to feel guilty. I did not have to explain where the money came from or why I had enough to send it. Silence kept everyone comfortable. At least, that was what I told myself. Then one Saturday afternoon, Maris called while I was folding Lark's laundry. "You are coming to our housewarming, right?" she asked. "Of course. Grant is inviting some of his friends. It will be fun. Normal fun, not one of your quiet little evenings." I paused with one of Lark's shirts in my hands. Maris laughed lightly as if she had said nothing wrong. Then she added, "Try to loosen up this time. Grant says he has something planned." I looked toward the hallway where Lark was humming to herself. "I'll be there," I said. At that point, I still thought she meant games. I had no idea Grant had already bought a mat. Maris met Grant Hollis at a wedding in Fairmont Ridge. She called me the next morning, still laughing from the night before. "I met someone," she said. "Not just someone. Taryn, I think this might actually be it." I was standing in my kitchen, trying to convince Lark to wear shoes before preschool. She had one sock on and a serious argument prepared about why socks were too tight. "What is his name?" I asked. "Grant. Grant Hollis." Maris paused, waiting for the reaction she wanted. "He is Army," she added. "Special Forces. A Green Beret." I remember looking at the toast burning in my pan while she kept talking. She told me he was confident. Focused. Different from other men. She said he had spent years doing difficult things in difficult places. She said he made her feel safe. At the time, I believed her. Grant had done hard things. I never denied that. He had earned the right to wear the uniform he wore, and I respected the kind of service that required sacrifice. The problem was never his record. The problem was what he needed everyone else to become whenever he walked into a room. Maris and Grant married less than a year later. The wedding was elegant but expensive in the way Maris liked. The venue had white stone arches, string lights across the courtyard, and waiters carrying drinks on silver trays. Grant stood at the center of every photograph. Even when Maris was beside him, he seemed to take up more space. At the reception, one of his friends slapped him on the shoulder and asked about a training rotation. Grant launched into a story before the man even finished the question. People listened. Grant was good at stories. He knew where to pause. He knew when to lower his voice. He knew how to make the room wait for the next detail. Then he looked at me. "So, Taryn," he said, smiling into his drink, "what kind of safety work do you do again?" I had heard that tone before. It was a question shaped like a joke. "Corporate safety compliance," I said. Grant nodded slowly. "Important stuff," he said. "Somebody has to keep the binders organized." A few people laughed. Maris laughed too, though she did not look at me when she did it. I smiled because I had spent years training myself to make people comfortable. That was the beginning. At first, the comments came lightly. Grant would mention a hard day in the field, then turn to me and ask whether I had survived another meeting about emergency exits. He would say he could not imagine sitting at a desk all day, as if calm work and easy work were the same thing. Sometimes I let it pass because I knew enough about men like Grant to recognize the hunger underneath it. He needed agreement. He needed every room to confirm that he was exceptional. I had no interest in competing with him. That was my mistake. Thanksgiving was the first time I understood the joke had started to settle into the family. My mother had cooked too much food, as she always did. The dining room table was crowded with serving bowls, casserole dishes, and the kind of mismatched plates she refused to replace because they reminded her of my father. Lark sat beside me with a paper placemat and a crayon. She was drawing a turkey with blue feathers. Grant was talking about a training exercise. "It is different when people depend on you," he said. "There is no room for mistakes. You do not get to hide behind a policy manual." Then he looked directly at me. "No offense, Taryn, but paperwork does not prepare you for the real world." My mother made a small sound that could have been a laugh or a nervous breath. Maris reached for her wine glass. One of my cousins chuckled. I looked down at my plate. Turkey, mashed potatoes, green beans, cranberry sauce. Everything was arranged neatly, like I could control the moment by keeping my food in order. "Probably true," I said. That was all. Lark glanced at me. She did not say anything, but I saw the question in her face. She was old enough to understand when adults were laughing at someone. She was not old enough to understand why that person would laugh along. Later, when I was helping my mother clear dishes, my phone vibrated against the wooden counter. The Bellamy family group chat had a new photo. Grant stood in front of a row of men wearing training gear, one arm around a friend's shoulder. Underneath, someone had written, "Grant looks like he is ready to run the whole world." Then another cousin replied, "Good thing Taryn can handle the paperwork." A third message followed almost immediately. "Paperwork mom to the rescue." The screen glowed in my hand. From the dining room, I could hear laughter roll through the open doorway. Forks touched plates. Someone asked for more pie. Lark was telling Maris about her blue turkey. I put my phone face down on the counter. My mother came beside me with a stack of dishes. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm fine," I said. She accepted that answer because everyone always had. The nickname spread after that. At barbecues, someone would ask whether I had brought the first aid kit. Grant would grin and say, "Of course she did. Taryn runs on forms and emergency contacts." At birthdays, he would ask whether I needed a clipboard before joining a conversation. Sometimes Maris told him to stop, but she said it while smiling. "Grant, be nice." He always answered the same way. "I am being nice. Taryn knows I am kidding." Then everyone would look at me, and I would make it easy for them. I would shrug. I would smile. I would say, "He is fine." Every time I did that, I helped him build a smaller version of me for the family to live inside. The part that stayed with me was not Grant's laughter. It was Lark's. Not because she was mocking me. She never did. But one afternoon, after a barbecue at my mother's apartment, she climbed into the back seat of my SUV and said, "Mom, Uncle Grant says you do paperwork all day." Her voice was innocent. She was repeating something she had heard adults say. I tightened my hands around the steering wheel. "That is not all I do," I said. Lark looked out the window. "What else do you do?" The honest answer sat behind my teeth. Instead, I said a lot of things. She nodded, already distracted by a dog walking past the car. But I drove home knowing something had changed. Grant was not only teaching my family how to dismiss me. He was teaching my daughter too. Thanksgiving at my mother's apartment always began with too many people in too little space. Nadine lived on the third floor of an older building near Port Linden's main street. The hallways smelled like radiator heat, cinnamon, and somebody's overcooked casserole. Her apartment had one long dining room, a narrow kitchen, and windows that rattled when the wind came off the water. My father had loved that apartment. After he died, my mother kept everything the same. His old reading chair stayed near the window. His worn flannel jacket still hung behind the bedroom door. Even the chipped ceramic bowl he used for loose change sat on the entry table. That Thanksgiving, the dining room was loud before I had even taken off my coat. Grant had already found his audience. He stood near the end of the table, talking with two of my cousins while Maris smiled beside him. Lark sat near my mother, carefully placing mini marshmallows on top of her sweet potatoes. She was old enough to understand the adults were tense. She was still young enough to think more marshmallows might fix it. I had barely filled my plate when my phone buzzed. The screen showed the number for Nadine's clinic. I stepped into the hallway and pulled the door closed behind me. The noise from the dining room softened, but it did not disappear. I could still hear Grant's voice through the wood. It always seemed to carry farther than everyone else's. "Ms. Bellamy," the woman on the phone asked. "We are calling about the balance on your mother's treatment account. The payment is overdue, and we need confirmation before the next appointment." My fingers tightened around the phone. "How much?" $1,840. The hallway light flickered once above me. I looked through the narrow window at the end of the corridor. Rain had started falling. It streaked down the glass in thin silver lines. "I can take care of it now," I said. The woman transferred me to billing. I gave my card number quietly, one digit at a time. The payment reader made a soft chirp when it processed. My hand was cold around the phone, although the hallway was overheated. "Your mother is confirmed for next Tuesday," the billing clerk said. "Thank you." "You are welcome," I replied. The words came out automatically. I ended the call and stood there for another second. The payment confirmation appeared on my screen. $1,840. Completed. I saved the receipt to the same hidden folder where I kept every other transfer. Rent assistance. Insurance gaps. Prescription balances. The repair bill for Maris's car after she called me crying one night because the mechanic wanted payment before releasing it. I had helped because I could. I had helped because that was what family meant to me. Then I opened the apartment door and walked back into the dining room. Grant was speaking louder now. "I am just saying, Maris and I have been trying to get ahead," he said. "We are not asking anyone to hand us everything. But sometimes it would be nice if family actually showed up." Maris looked uncomfortable for half a second. Then she reached for her water glass. My cousin Dale nodded as if Grant had made a serious point. "You two have a lot going on," he said. "We do," Grant answered. "House repairs. Bills. Life. You know how it is." I did know how it was. I had paid $2,600 toward Maris's car repair 3 months earlier. I had paid nearly half of Nadine's treatment account that morning. I had covered the difference on a prescription last spring when my mother's insurance refused it. But I did not say any of that. I picked up the bread basket and held it out to Grant. "More rolls?" I asked. He looked at me, then gave a short laugh. "Always prepared," he said. "That is Taryn. She has a form for every emergency." The table laughed. Not everyone. My mother did not. Maris smiled without looking at me. Lark stared down at her plate. I waited until Grant took a roll before I sat back down. That was the kind of silence I had become good at. It did not look like fear. It looked like patience. That was why people mistook it for strength. A few weeks later, we went to a birthday dinner for one of my cousins. The restaurant had dim lights, crowded booths, and a birthday banner taped crookedly to the wall. Lark was tired before dessert arrived. She leaned against my arm, warm and heavy, while I rubbed slow circles across her back. One of Grant's friends sat across from me. He had met me only once before at a family barbecue. "So, Taryn," he said, "Maris mentioned you work in safety. Do you ever do field training?" I opened my mouth. Grant answered first. Taryn probably did one of those confidence courses with a helmet and a souvenir certificate. He laughed at his own joke. His friend laughed because he thought he was supposed to. Maris gave Grant a light push with her shoulder. "Stop." But she was smiling when she said it. I looked down at Lark. Her eyes were half closed, but I felt her body shift against me. She heard the laughter. She heard my name attached to it. For a moment, I pictured telling them everything. I pictured explaining the training rooms, the protective details, the nights when I had walked toward danger because somebody else could not get out alone. I pictured Grant's face changing. Then I imagined Lark watching the adults argue over her mother. So I said nothing. On the drive back to North Harbor, rain covered the windshield. Streetlights stretched across the wet road in long yellow lines. Lark had fallen asleep in the back seat with her coat over her legs. Both my hands were locked around the steering wheel. I could feel the leather pressing into my palms. I kept calling silence the cheaper choice. That night, I understood I had been paying the wrong bill for years. Because Grant's jokes were no longer landing only on me. They were teaching my daughter what she was allowed to believe about her mother. And I still had not found the courage to stop him. Maris started sending photos of the house before they had even signed the final papers. The first picture showed a pale brick exterior with black shutters and a front porch wide enough for 2 chairs and a small table. The second showed a kitchen with white cabinets, a long island, and pendant lights that looked too expensive to touch. Then came the living room. Then the primary bedroom. Then a photo of Grant standing in the backyard with both arms stretched wide, like he had personally built the neighborhood around himself. The group chat filled with heart emojis and congratulations. Nadine wrote, "Your father would be proud." I stared at that message longer than I should have. My father would have been happy for Maris. He liked seeing people build something they could care for. But he would not have confused square footage with character. He would not have looked at a new house and decided that made someone bigger. Still, I typed, "It looks beautiful. I'm happy for you both." And I meant it. Maris had wanted a home like that for years. She wanted a place where Lark and her cousins could play in the yard. She wanted holiday dinners that did not require squeezing everyone around Nadine's small table. I wanted that for her too. Some habits are older than pride. I still showed up with dessert and a reason to stay quiet. The barbecue was scheduled for a Saturday in late March. The morning was cool, but the sun had broken through by noon. I spent the early hours making peach cobbler in the kitchen while Lark sat at the counter with her tablet and a bowl of cereal. "Are we going to Aunt Maris's new house today?" she asked. "We are." "Will Uncle Grant make jokes about your job?" She said it without looking up. My hand stopped over the baking dish. Lark had learned to ask questions carefully. That was not something a child should have to learn around family. "I do not know," I said. She nodded and pushed another spoonful of cereal into her mouth. "Maybe he will be nicer because it is his housewarming." I wanted to believe that. I covered the cobbler with foil, set it in a glass baking dish, and placed it carefully on the passenger side floorboard. Lark climbed into the back seat with a book and her favorite cardigan. We drove toward Briar Glen through streets lined with new houses, young trees, and sidewalks that still looked too clean to belong to anybody. Grant and Maris's house sat near the end of a curved street. Cars filled both sides of the road. I counted at least 20 before I found a space 2 houses down. The backyard was already crowded when we arrived. There were neighbors in polos and sundresses. Maris's friends stood near the patio, holding drinks and talking about paint colors. Grant's army friends occupied the space around the grill, loud enough that their stories carried across the lawn. A few older men stood near a large cooler at the edge of the yard. They had the kind of posture I recognized immediately. Still, watchful, comfortable without needing attention. One of them had silver at his temples and a weathered face. He wore a plain navy shirt and held a bottle of water instead of beer. That was Mateo Rivas. I did not know his name yet. Lark spotted her cousins near the swing set and slipped her hand from mine. "Can I go?" "Stay where I can see you," I said. "I will." She ran across the grass before I could add anything else. I carried the cobbler to the food table. Maris saw me and hurried over, her face bright with the kind of happiness I had always wanted for her. "You made peach cobbler," she said. "I knew you would. I know it is your favorite." She hugged me. For a few seconds, she felt like my sister again. Not Grant's wife. Not the woman who smiled when he reduced me to a joke. Just Maris. Then Grant appeared behind her with a spatula in one hand. "There she is," he said. The safety queen. He looked down at the dish in my hands. Did you bring a warning label for that? A few men near the grill laughed. I gave him a polite smile. It has peaches. The threat level is manageable. Grant laughed louder than the joke required. Good. We do not need an evacuation drill before lunch. Maris touched his arm. Grant. What? He said. I am welcoming her. I set the cobbler down without answering. For the next half hour, I did what I always did. I checked on Lark. I spoke with Nadine, who had arrived with a small potted plant for the porch. I listened to Maris explain where they wanted to put patio furniture. I accepted a cup of lemonade from a neighbor who asked whether I lived nearby. North Harbor, I said. Nice area, she replied. What do you do? Before I could answer, Grant called from the grill. She keeps office buildings from catching fire. The neighbor laughed politely. I looked at Grant. He was smiling at me over the smoke. It is a little more than that, I said. His eyebrows lifted, amused. Is it? For 1 second, the old answer waited for me. Something like that. I swallowed it. Sometimes, I said, it is a lot more. Grant held my gaze longer than he usually did. Then he looked away, as though the moment had not happened. The grill hissed. Charcoal crackled beneath the grate. The smell of smoke and grilled meat hung low in the warm air. The grass was still damp from the morning, and moisture pressed through the soles of my shoes when I stepped closer to the edge of the lawn. That was when Grant disappeared into the garage. He came back carrying a rolled-up gray grappling mat. It was almost 10 feet long. He dropped it onto the grass with a heavy thud and began unrolling it in front of everyone. The rubber snapped open section by section until it lay flat across the lawn. Kids, Grant called. Come over here. I am going to teach you some basics. The children drifted closer, including Lark. Grant bounced lightly on the balls of his feet. He rolled his shoulders and looked around to make sure people were watching. His friends were watching. Maris was watching. The older men by the cooler were watching. Then Grant's eyes found me at the edge of the yard. I knew what he wanted before he said my name. He wanted a witness to his own importance. And this time, he had brought a mat. Grant waited until enough people had gathered around the mat. He knew how to create an audience. He did not rush it. He joked with the children first, showed one of the boys how to stand with his feet apart, then demonstrated a loose grip on another kid's wrist. Every movement was broad enough for the adults near the patio to see. The gray mat sat in the middle of his new lawn like a stage. Grant looked toward me. Come on, Taryn, he called. Let's get you out here. The conversation around the food table thinned out. A few people turned fully toward us. Others pretended they had not, which was how you could tell they were listening even harder. I stood near the cobbler dish with my lemonade in one hand. Grant pointed at the mat. Look at her, he told the yard. Barely 100 pounds. A few of his friends laughed. He opened his hands as if he were offering me something generous. I'll go easy, sweetheart. You're just somebody's mom. Maris stood beside the cooler, holding a paper plate. She looked at Grant, then at me. For half a second, I thought she might stop him. Instead, she smiled. Try not to chip a nail, she said. That got a bigger laugh. The sound moved across the lawn in pieces. Somebody near the grill snorted. One of Grant's friends slapped the side of his chair. A neighbor lifted her phone, probably because she thought this was harmless entertainment. I saw Lark near the swing set. She was not laughing. She was watching me. That was the part that settled everything. I thought about the Thanksgiving table. I thought about the hallway outside my mother's apartment, the payment confirmation glowing blue on my phone while Grant complained that nobody helped him. I thought about every time I had lowered my eyes to a plate, every time I had made myself smaller so other people could keep their version of peace. My hands stayed still around the plastic cup. Being humiliated was not the same as being peaceful. I set the lemonade on the edge of the food table. Then I removed my watch and placed it beside the cup. It was an ordinary movement. That was all it looked like. Grant grinned. There she is, he said. I knew you had some fight in you. I stepped onto the mat. The rubber was warm from the sun. It gave slightly beneath my shoes. Grant stood across from me with his shoulders loose and his weight forward, already enjoying the scene he believed he had arranged. I did not tell him to be careful. I did not ask him to reconsider. I looked at his hands. His right shoulder dropped a fraction lower than his left. His lead foot pressed harder into the mat. His eyes flicked toward my legs, then back to my face. He wanted a takedown. He wanted it fast. He wanted people to remember it. "Ready?" Grant asked. I nodded once. He came at me hard. There was no playful opening. No gentle demonstration for the kids. He lowered his level and drove forward with the commitment of someone who had decided I would not get a second chance to embarrass him by staying upright. His hands reached for my legs. I moved before they closed. His forward momentum carried him past the place he expected me to be. I shifted to his outside angle, controlled his wrist, and used the opening he gave me. Nothing about it was dramatic. The body follows leverage whether pride agrees or not. Grant tried to correct. He was already late. I had his balance. Then I had his neck. The yard disappeared. There was only pressure, position, breathing, and the exact point when a person's resistance changes. 7 seconds. That was how long it took. Grant's body went heavy in my hold. I eased him down before gravity could do it badly. I placed one hand beneath the back of his head and lowered him onto the mat. His cheek rested against the gray rubber. His breathing was steady. His pulse was there. The first sound after he went down was a chair scraping hard across the patio. Then another. 3 of Grant's friends stepped forward at once. I stayed on one knee beside Grant, checking his airway and keeping his head positioned safely. The mat was hot under my knees. Smoke from the grill drifted low across the lawn. Nobody spoke. Then a man near the cooler moved. It was the older man in the navy shirt. Mateo Rivas. He had not taken his eyes off me since Grant rushed in. Mateo lifted one hand toward the men stepping forward. "She's tactical response," he said. His voice was quiet. It still carried across the yard. "Back off." The 3 men stopped. Grant was beginning to come around. His eyelids moved first. Then his jaw tightened. He blinked up at the sky, confused for a moment, before the understanding reached him. The patio had gone silent. Maris still held her paper plate, but one corner had folded under her fingers. Nadine stood beside the food table with both hands pressed together. Lark had not moved from the swing set. The neighbor with the phone was still recording. Later, I learned the video lasted 47 seconds. It showed Grant calling me onto the mat. It showed Maris laughing. It showed him shooting forward. It showed me lowering him carefully onto the ground after he stopped fighting. What it did not show was the part nobody else could see. I did not feel victorious. I felt tired. Tired enough to stop pretending that being humiliated was the same as being peaceful. Mateo looked at me the way professionals sometimes look at each other after watching something they recognize. He did not know my name. He did not know my history. But he had seen enough. A stranger had understood me in 7 seconds. My own family had spent years refusing to look. Grant came back in stages. First, his eyes opened without focus. He stared at the bright sky above him, blinking as though the light had changed while he was gone. Then he shifted one shoulder, tried to sit up too quickly, and stopped when Mateo placed a steady hand near his elbow. "Easy," Mateo said. "Sit still for a minute." Grant looked around. The barbecue had not returned to normal. Nobody had moved back to the food table. Nobody had restarted a conversation. The charcoal still popped under the grill, and a child's plastic cup rolled slowly across the patio, but every adult was watching him. Then Grant saw me kneeling beside the mat. The confusion left his face. What replaced it was harder. His jaw flexed. His cheeks went red. He pushed himself upright, ignoring Mateo's hand. "That was a cheap shot," he said. Nobody answered. Grant looked directly at me. I was not ready. I thought we were just messing around. I checked his pupils once more, then stood. His breathing was even. His balance looked steady enough. There was no reason for me to stay close. Mateo stayed crouched beside him. "That was not luck," he said. Her movement was too clean for luck. Grant turned toward him. "You do not know what happened." Mateo did not raise his voice. "I know what I watched." Sit down and drink some water before you make a bigger mistake. Grant's friends had stopped moving, but they had not relaxed. One stood with his hands clenched beside his hips. Another stared at the mat, then at me, then away. They had expected Grant to put on a show. Instead, they had watched him lose control of a situation he created. Maris was still near the cooler. Her face had gone pale under her makeup. She held her phone in one hand now, though I had not seen her take it out. I wondered whether she had watched the whole thing through a screen, or whether she was looking at it directly for the first time. Lark stood near the swing set with her cousins. She was very still. I walked toward her without hurrying. "Get your cardigan," I said. She nodded and ran to retrieve it from the patio chair where she had left it. Nadine called my name softly. "Taryn, maybe you should stay and talk." I picked up my watch from the food table and fastened it around my wrist. "There is nothing useful to say right now," I told her. Grant heard me. He gave a short, bitter laugh. "Of course. You get to do that, then walk out like you are above everybody." I looked at him. His shirt had grass stains near one shoulder. A faint red mark showed along his jawline from the mat. He looked less like the man who had called me somebody's mom and more like someone who had just realized the room no longer belonged to him. "I am taking my daughter home," I said. That was all. I took Lark's hand and walked through the side gate. I did not look back. The sound of the gate closing behind us was small. It still felt final. Inside my SUV, Lark buckled herself in without being reminded. The seat belt clicked into place. I started the engine, pulled away from the curb, and waited until we had turned out of Briar Glen before speaking. For the first mile, neither of us said anything. Rain began tapping against the windshield. It was light at first, then steadier as we reached the main road. The wipers moved across the glass in a regular rhythm. Lark looked at me through the rearview mirror. "Mom?" "Yes." "You put Uncle Grant to sleep." I kept my eyes on the road. "He will be okay." "Did you hurt him?" "No. I made sure he was safe." She thought about that for a moment. "How did you know how to do it?" The question sat between us. My daughter knew I packed school lunches. She knew I could fix a loose cabinet hinge and make pancakes shaped like stars. She knew I had a job in an office where people needed to be safe. She did not know I had carried injured people through rooms where panic could get you killed. She did not know I had spent years learning how to make decisions before fear had time to turn them into mistakes. "I had a lot of training," I said finally. "Like Uncle Grant?" "Some of it was like that." Lark leaned her head against the window. "Are you going to tell me about it someday?" The rain tapped harder against the glass. "Yes," I said. "When you are old enough to understand." She accepted that answer, but I could feel the question remain. By the time we reached North Harbor, she had fallen asleep. I carried her inside, changed her into pajamas, and tucked her beneath the quilt my father had bought when she was born. Then I went downstairs. The kitchen clock read 11:43 p.m. I turned on only the light above the stove. It cast a yellow circle across the counter and left the rest of the room in shadow. My phone had 3 missed calls from Maris, 1 from Nadine, and a message from an unknown number. I ignored all of them for the moment. Instead, I called Sloane Pritchard. Sloane and I had worked together for almost 7 years. She had seen me in situations where nobody had the luxury of pretending to be harmless. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Taryn, I need to tell you something. Is Lark okay?" "She is fine." The pause on the line changed. "What happened?" I told her. I gave her the facts. Grant's mat. The crowd. The joke about my weight. Maris laughing. The takedown. Mateo stopping Grant's friends from rushing forward. When I finished, I expected Sloane to laugh. She did not. "You did not become dangerous in 7 seconds, Taryn," she said. "You just stopped pretending you were harmless." I pressed my palm flat against the kitchen counter. He was trying to embarrass me. "I know. I could have walked away. You have walked away for years." Her voice was not cruel. That made it harder to hear. I looked toward the hallway where Lark slept. "I did not lose control," I said. "No," Sloane replied. "You finally took it back." After we hung up, I picked up my phone again. The unknown message was a screenshot from the barbecue group chat. Someone had already posted the video. 47 seconds. The first reply underneath it came from Maris. Grant was not ready. This is being misunderstood. I stared at the screen until it went dark. Then another notification appeared. The video had been forwarded. I did not sleep much after the video started moving through other people's phones. At 12:18 a.m., Maris called again. I watched her name light up my screen on the kitchen counter. The phone rang until it stopped. At 12:23, Nadine called. At 12:29, Grant called once, then again before midnight had fully passed. I let every call ring. Not because I wanted to punish anyone. I needed the house to stay quiet long enough for me to hear my own thoughts without someone else trying to arrange them for me. Lark was asleep upstairs. The rain had slowed to a soft tapping against the windows. The refrigerator hummed behind me, and the only light in the kitchen came from the lamp above the stove. I opened my bank records. Then I began counting. The first transfer had been made on February 3rd, 4 years earlier. It covered $612 for a prescription that Nadine's insurance had denied. The second was $1,140 toward rent after her building raised the monthly rate. The third was $2,600 for Maris's car repair, sent directly to the mechanic because she had been too embarrassed to ask for it in front of Grant. I printed every one. 38 payments. Some were small. Some were not. There were pharmacy balances, clinic invoices, utility bills, and one emergency dental payment after Nadine cracked a molar. The total sat at the bottom of my spreadsheet in a number I had never needed anyone else to see. $47,386. I had not kept the records to use against them. I kept records because that was how I moved through the world. A documented decision was easier to defend. A clean paper trail kept panic from turning into confusion. But that night, the pages stacking beside my printer told a story I had refused to say out loud. My family had taken help from me for years without knowing who I was. Worse, they had been comfortable believing I was too small to matter. I rested both hands on the counter and looked toward the dark hallway. Lark knew the version of me that packed lunches, paid bills, and helped with homework. She had watched Grant reduce me to a punchline. She had watched Maris laugh. Then she had watched me put Grant on the mat and walk away without explaining anything. I could not leave her with another half-truth. At 1:07 a.m., I opened a blank document and began writing. The letter was addressed to Nadine, Maris, and Grant. I did not accuse them in the first paragraph. I did not list every joke. I did not mention the exact words Grant used in the backyard. They knew what he had said. Maris knew what she had added. I wrote that I had quietly supported family expenses for 4 years. I wrote that I had done it willingly, because I loved them and because I could. I wrote that the arrangement would now end in its current form. From that point forward, any help I gave would be visible, discussed, and treated with the respect owed to the person providing it. I read the sentence twice before leaving it in. Then I wrote the part that mattered most. I was not withdrawing love. I was withdrawing from the version of love that required me to disappear. At 1:41 a.m., I saved the letter, printed 3 copies, and set them beside the payment records. The printer ran in slow, steady bursts. Each page came out warm. The paper was thick enough that I could feel the edge of every sheet against my thumb. Then I called Bram Kessler. Bram had been my commanding supervisor for 3 years before he retired from federal service. He was 61, built like a concrete post, and had a habit of pausing long enough before answering that people often filled the silence for him. He answered at 7:12 the next morning. "Taryn," he said, "you never call before 8 unless something matters. I need a releasable professional summary." There was a pause. "Who is asking for it?" "My family." Another pause followed. Longer this time. "Do they know what you did?" "Not really." I told him enough. I did not give him the whole backyard scene at first. Then I told him about the mat, Grant's comment, the crowd, and the video. Bram listened without interrupting. When I finished, he exhaled once. "Give them the facts, Taryn," he said. "Do not decorate the truth for people who never bothered to ask for it." By 10:36 a.m., a secure email arrived in my inbox. The summary was 4 paragraphs long. It documented nearly 24 years in tactical response operations. It described protective assignments involving threatened witnesses, crisis response training for high-risk teams, and field coordination during violent incidents. It included a commendation for a civilian rescue in 2018 and a documented line-of-duty injury from 2021. The language was careful. It did not reveal names, locations, or restricted operations. It did not need to. The facts stood on their own. Bram attached a separate letter with his signature at the bottom. It was shorter than the summary. Taryn Bellamy served with uncommon discipline, judgment, and restraint. In the years I supervised her, she was the person I trusted when the situation had no room for error. I printed it once. Then I printed it again. The second copy was for me. By noon, I had 3 identical packets arranged on my kitchen table. Each included the letter, a 4-paragraph career summary, Bram's signed confirmation, and a 2-page ledger showing the 38 payments I had made. I did not include every receipt. I included enough. At the North Harbor Post Office, I chose certified mail with signature confirmation. The clerk weighed each envelope and stamped the tracking labels in a row. The adhesive smelled sharp when I sealed the final flap. Nadine's packet went first. Then Maris's. Then Grant's. I watched the clerk slide all 3 into the outgoing bin behind the counter. For 4 years, I had made sure my help arrived without a name attached. This time, every page had mine. Grant called at 8:16 the next morning. I was parked outside the North Harbor Market with a bag of groceries on the passenger seat and Lark's school pickup still 3 hours away. His name appeared on my dashboard screen. I watched it ring twice before I accepted the call through the car speakers. He did not say hello. You embarrass me in my own backyard. The heat inside the SUV had climbed quickly under the morning sun. I cracked my window another inch and listened to him breathe. You pulled me onto a mat in front of 46 people, I said. I did not ask for that. You knew what you were doing. Yes. That answer made him pause. Then he raised his voice. You made me look like an idiot in front of my friends, my neighbors, everybody Maris knows. And now you are sending letters like you are cutting the family off over one joke. I looked through the windshield at a woman pushing a cart across the lot. She wore a red coat and moved carefully around a puddle near the curb. I am not cutting anybody off, I said. I am changing an arrangement that was hidden and unhealthy. You are punishing everybody because your feelings got hurt. My hand rested on the steering wheel. I am not punishing you, Grant. I am done financing a story that makes me disappear. The line went quiet for a moment. Grant had expected anger. He had expected something he could repeat later, something loud enough to turn into proof that I was unreasonable. He did not know what to do with a sentence that left no room for him to perform. You are acting like you are better than us, he said. No. I am acting like I exist. I ended the call before he could answer. The air inside the vehicle felt thick. I sat there for perhaps 30 seconds, then started the engine and drove home. By noon, my email inbox had 3 delivery confirmations. Nadine's certified packet had been signed for at 9:11 a.m. Maris's was signed for at 10:03. Grant's had been delivered at 10:26. Each email carried the same plain confirmation. Delivered. Signature recorded. I opened my banking app next. 3 automatic payments were scheduled before the end of the month. Nadine's rental assistance. A monthly prescription reimbursement. A standing transfer that covered a portion of her clinic balance. My finger hovered over the first cancellation button. The hard part was not stopping the transfers. The hard part was resisting the instinct to rescue people from consequences they had helped create. I canceled the rent support first. Confirm. Then the prescription reimbursement. Confirm. Then the clinic transfer. Confirm. 3 short email notifications arrived one after another. Each one made a soft sound from my phone. Payment schedule canceled. Payment schedule canceled. Payment schedule canceled. I saved the confirmations in the same folder as the 38 receipts. Then I made coffee and waited for the phone to ring. It did not ring for another 2 hours. The story moved faster through Grant's world than through mine. Mateo Rivas had been at the barbecue. He knew people from tactical response circles, retired instructors, and former military trainers who had spent enough years around real skill to recognize it without needing an introduction. I never asked Mateo to repeat what he saw. I did not need to. One of Grant's friends sent a message to another friend. Someone forwarded the 47-second video. A name appeared beneath it. Then another. By late afternoon, Grant had learned that the older men he wanted to impress were discussing the backyard mat at a local military gym. I heard it from Maris. She called while I was sorting Lark's clean clothes on my bed. Grant went to the gym, she said. I did not stop folding. And a man there asked him about you. Her voice was tight. What did he ask? Maris repeated it exactly. Is it true you dragged your sister-in-law onto a mat to make her look small? I placed one of Lark's shirts into the drawer. What did Grant say? He said you caught him off guard. And then, Maris breathed into the phone. The man asked why Grant had to catch you off guard if he was supposed to be going easy on you. I closed the drawer. Grant had no useful answer for that. Maris did not defend him this time. She did not explain that he was stressed, tired, or joking. She only said, I do not know what I am supposed to say to him. You do not have to say anything yet, I told her. Just do not pretend you did not see it. She hung up without another word. That evening, I drove to Nadine's apartment. The sky had turned the color of wet concrete. Her building's hallway was overheated, and the old elevator smelled faintly of dust and boiled cabbage. When she opened the door, she was holding my letter in both hands. The packet sat on the kitchen table. The 4-paragraph summary lay beside Bram's signed letter. The payment ledger was on top, its columns visible from the doorway. Nadine looked smaller than she had at Thanksgiving. I did not know, she said. No, I replied. You did not. I thought you had a stable office job. I thought you were doing fine. I was doing fine. She looked toward the ledger. You paid all of this? 38 payments across 4 years. Her fingers tightened around the letter. Why would you not tell me? I took off my coat and hung it over the chair. Because I thought helping quietly was kinder. Nadine looked up at me. And now? Now I think quiet help can become another way of making someone invisible. She sat down slowly. I do not want you to abandon me, she said. I will not, I told her. But I will not help you as a ghost anymore. We will talk about bills before they become emergencies. We will make a plan. You will know what I am doing, and I will know what you need. Her eyes filled, but she did not cry. Neither did I. The apartment was silent except for the radiator clicking behind us. For the first time in years, my mother was looking at me without a story prepared. And somewhere across town, Grant was learning that a reputation can travel farther than a joke. Maris called me 3 days after I met with Nadine. Her name appeared on my phone while I was standing in the kitchen, rinsing Lark's lunch container at the sink. Outside, North Harbor was covered in low gray clouds. The street beyond my window was wet from an early morning shower, and the gutters carried thin lines of water toward the storm drain. I dried my hands on a towel before answering. Hi, Maris. She did not return the greeting right away. I do not know what to say, she said. Her voice sounded different. It had lost the bright, polished tone she used when she wanted everyone to believe things were fine. You do not have to say everything at once, I replied. I read your letter again. I leaned against the counter. So did Mom. I know. For several seconds, all I could hear was the faint sound of traffic through her end of the call. Then Maris said, I never asked you. The sentence was quiet enough that I almost missed it. I mean, really asked, she continued. Not what you did for work in a casual way. I never asked where you went. I never asked why you were tired. I never asked what your life looked like when you were not sitting at Mom's table. I watched a drop of water slide down the kitchen window. You were busy living your own life, I said. That is not an excuse. No, I said. It is not. She took a shaky breath. For almost 30 years, I thought you liked being the quiet one. I did, sometimes. Then why did you let us believe you were just? I do not know. Smaller than you were. The question deserved an honest answer. Because it was easy for both of us, I said. You liked being the person people noticed. I liked being the person who did not create problems. You got to shine, and I made myself useful in the background. Maris did not argue. That was how I knew she was finally hearing me. I laughed at him, she said. At the barbecue. I laughed before I even thought about it. I know. I keep remembering it. I know, I said again. The silence between us held longer this time. I am not asking you to forgive me today, Maris said. I just want to understand what I missed. I looked toward the hallway where Lark's backpack hung from its hook. Understanding is a better place to start than excuses, I told her. After we ended the call, I drove to the Tactical Response Training Center on the north side of town. The building was set back from the road behind a chain-link fence and a broad gravel lot. Inside, the air always smelled the same: rubber flooring, disinfectant, metal lockers, and the faint cold breath of the industrial air conditioning system. That morning, the training floor was busy. Boots struck the mat in steady rhythms. Gloves hit padded shields. Instructors moved between lanes with clipboards, calling out corrections without raising their voices. Nobody there needed me to explain why I stood a certain way or why I watched doorways out of habit. They knew. That was the difference. Bex Calder was assigned to my afternoon group. She was 26, quick on her feet, and better at observation than she believed. She had a habit of apologizing before anyone accused her of doing something wrong. Sorry, she said after stepping out of line to retrieve a dropped marker. Sorry, she said when she asked a question during the briefing. Sorry, she said when another trainee backed into her during a drill. I noticed it because I had once done the same thing. During the third exercise, Bex identified a weakness in the room entry plan that 2 other trainees had missed. She raised her hand halfway, then lowered it when someone else began speaking. I waited until the group took a water break. Bex, I said, walk with me. She followed me toward the far end of the room, where the sounds from the training lanes softened into a steady background echo. You saw something in the entry plan, I said. She looked at the floor. It was probably nothing. It was not nothing. Tell me. She explained that the second team would have crossed a blind angle if the first team entered too quickly. She was right. I had seen it too. Why did you stop yourself from saying it? I asked. Bex shrugged. I did not want to sound difficult. I reached for the printed schedule clipped to my folder. At the bottom, I wrote 3 lines in blue ink. Strong situational awareness. Accurate risk identification. Speak sooner. Then I handed it to her. Quiet can be discipline, I said. But when you use it to make everybody else comfortable at your expense, it becomes hiding. Bex looked at the page for a long moment. Then she nodded. I will work on that. You already are, I said. Later, when the training center emptied, I walked out to my SUV with the schedule still on my mind. The air outside was cold enough to sting my cheeks. Gravel shifted under my shoes as I crossed the lot. I had spent years teaching other people how to be brave in a crisis. I had never taught myself how to be honest at a family table. On the drive home, I stopped at a small coffee shop along the river. The windows overlooked the gray water, and the tables were mostly empty except for a man reading the newspaper near the back. I ordered coffee and sat by the glass. My phone buzzed before I had taken the first sip. It was a message from Maris. Can we meet in person? Just us. No Grant. I will come to North Harbor if that feels easier. I read it twice. Then I set the phone beside my cup and watched the river move past the window. For the first time, my sister was not asking me to keep the peace. She was asking me to tell the truth. Grant came to my house 36 days after the barbecue. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Lark was still at school, and I was on the front porch replacing a loose screw in the railing when his truck stopped at the curb. I recognized the engine before I looked up. He sat inside for almost a minute. Then he got out. Grant wore jeans, a dark jacket, and the same watch he had worn at the barbecue. He stood at the bottom of my steps with both hands in his pockets, looking at the porch instead of at me. I set the screwdriver on the top rail. What do you need, Grant? He looked up then. I wanted to apologize. I waited. He climbed the first step, then stopped before he reached the porch. I am sorry it got out of hand, he said. The sentence stayed between us. It was carefully built. It did not contain a subject. It did not say what had gotten out of hand. It did not name the mat, the crowd, Lark, or the words he had used. I picked up the screwdriver and turned it once between my fingers. "Go on," I said. Grant rubbed one hand over the back of his neck. "You took it too seriously." I was trying to have some fun, and suddenly I am the bad guy everywhere I go. The sound of a lawnmower carried from 3 houses down. A delivery truck passed at the end of the street. Grant stood in front of me, waiting for me to make the conversation easier. That had always been my job in his mind. I did not do it. "That is an apology for your embarrassment," I said. "It is not an apology for what you did to me." His mouth tightened. I said I was sorry. "You said you were sorry people saw it. That is not fair." I looked at him steadily. "Grant, for almost 9 years, you decided who I was before you knew anything about me. You made me the joke at dinners, birthdays, barbecues, and holidays. You did it in front of my daughter. You called me paperwork mom until other people did too." He looked past me, toward the front door. "I did not know it bothered you that much." "That is part of the problem. You never asked." He shifted his weight on the step. For the first time since I had known him, he looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical effort. The performance was gone. The easy confidence had nowhere to stand. "What do you want from me?" he asked. The question did not sound like a challenge. It sounded like he had finally run out of arguments. I thought about Lark's face at the swing set. I thought about Maris laughing beside the cooler. I thought about every time Grant had treated my silence as permission. "I want one thing," I said. "Before you decide who someone is, get curious enough to ask them. Make that a habit. Start with me, but do not stop there." Grant looked down at the porch boards. "That is it. That is the beginning." He nodded once. Then he walked back to his truck without asking to come inside. I watched him pull away. After he turned the corner, I picked up the screwdriver and finished tightening the loose rail. 2 days later, Mateo called me. His number had been saved after the barbecue, though I had not expected to hear from him again. "Did Grant talk to you?" he asked. "He came by." "And?" "He has not reached the part where he understands what he did." Mateo was quiet for a second. I asked him to meet me for coffee. I looked out through my kitchen window. Lark was at the table doing her spelling homework, pressing too hard with her pencil. "You did not need to do that," I said. "I know," Mateo replied. "But some things land differently when they come from outside the family." Mateo chose a diner on the south side of North Harbor. It was the kind of place with red booths, cracked vinyl menus, and coffee that tasted burnt no matter how much cream you added. Grant arrived first. Mateo told me later that he had looked irritated when he walked in and saw who was waiting. "What is this about?" Grant asked. Mateo stirred his coffee once. "You tell me." Grant sat across from him and said nothing. Mateo leaned forward. "When Taryn put you down on that mat, she got her hand under your head before you hit the ground." Grant looked away. "That does not mean anything." "It means everything," Mateo said. "She had control. She could have let you land hard. She did not. She checked your breathing before she checked whether anyone was coming at her." Grant's eyes moved toward the diner window. Mateo continued. "That was not mercy because she felt sorry for you. That was training. It was instinct. It is what she does when somebody is hurt, even when that person made the situation worse." The waitress walked past with a pot of coffee. Grant did not look at her. "She made me look stupid," he said. Mateo did not raise his voice. "You walked her onto a mat because you wanted people to laugh at her. Then she protected your head while you were unconscious. Those are not the same kind of person, Grant." The conversation ended soon after that. Grant went home alone. That night, he sat in his living room while Maris was upstairs. The lights were off except for the lamp beside the couch. He opened the 47-second video on his phone and watched it again. At first, he watched himself. He watched the way he called me over. He watched his friends laugh. He watched Maris lift her voice with a joke about my nails. Then he watched the takedown. He watched it once. Then again. Finally, He stopped the video at the frame where my hand was beneath the back of his head. The screen lit his face in the dark. For 7 seconds, Grant had been certain he was in control. The video showed something else. Grant came back 4 days after Mateo met him at the diner. It was early evening. Lark was upstairs in her room, reading aloud to herself in the uneven rhythm she used when she wanted to sound older than 7. I was standing at the stove, stirring tomato sauce, when I saw Grant's truck through the kitchen window. He parked at the curb and stayed inside for several seconds. Then he came to the front door. This time, when I opened it, he did not stand on the steps and wait for me to carry the conversation. "Can I come in?" he asked. I looked at him for a moment. Then I stepped aside. Grant entered quietly. He did not scan the room or fill the silence with a joke. He stood near the kitchen table, the one my father had built from oak boards 30 years earlier. The surface had scratches from homework, holiday meals, and Lark's first attempt at carving a heart into the corner with a butter knife. I turned the heat down under the sauce. "What did you come to say?" I asked. Grant rested both hands on the back of one of the chairs. I watched the video again. I did not answer. "I watched it enough times that I know exactly where it changes," he said. "You did not wait for me to get hurt. You put your hand under my head before I hit the mat." The kitchen was quiet except for the soft bubbling from the pot. "I kept thinking about that," he continued. "I was trying to humiliate you. You knew that. Everyone knew it. But you still made sure I did not get hurt." I pulled the spoon from the sauce and set it on a folded paper towel. Grant looked at the floor. "I spent almost 9 years deciding who you were without ever asking you a real question." The words came slowly. He did not sound rehearsed. "I made you smaller because it made me feel larger. I am ashamed that I needed that." For a few seconds, neither of us moved. A real apology does not make the room easier. It makes the truth harder to avoid. Grant took a breath and kept going. "I am sorry I pulled you onto that mat. I am sorry I made jokes about you in front of Lark. I am sorry I turned every family gathering into a place where you had to sit quietly while I made myself important." I watched his hands tighten around the chair back. "I thought I was the person who understood pressure," he said. "But I was creating it for you and your own family." I did not rush to tell him it was okay. That was another habit I had spent years breaking. "That is the first true thing you have said to me in a long time," I told him. "It does not erase what happened. It does not make trust return on the same day. But it is a place to begin." Grant nodded. "I understand." "I need you to understand something else," I said. "Being forgiven and being trusted are not the same thing. One can happen in a conversation. The other happens through choices made over time." "I know," he said. For once, I believed he meant it. The front door opened 20 minutes later. Maris came in carrying a manila folder. She had texted earlier that she wanted to talk, but I had not told her Grant was there. When she saw him sitting at the table, she paused. "I can come back," she said. "No," I replied. "Stay." Grant looked at Maris, then stood. "I should go." Maris moved aside so he could reach the hallway. He stopped near her for a moment, but did not touch her arm or try to explain himself. He walked out without another word. When the door closed, Maris set the folder on the table. Inside were the documents I had mailed. My 4-paragraph professional summary. Bram's signed letter. The payment ledger. She had placed everything in plastic sleeves, as if she had been afraid the papers might tear. She sat across from me. For several seconds, she only looked at the summary. Then she raised her eyes. "What do you actually do, Taryn?" It was the first time she had asked it without a smile, without a shortcut, and without expecting an answer that fit inside a family joke. So I told her what I could. I told her that my work involved crisis response, protective operations, threat assessment, and training teams who might have 1 minute to make a decision that affected everyone in the room. I told her there were assignments I could never describe because other people's safety depended on silence. I told her I had been injured in 2021 during an extraction that went wrong before it went right. I told her I had received a commendation in 2018 because a civilian family got out of a bad situation alive. I did not describe the worst nights. I did not need to. Maris listened without interrupting. Her hands stayed flat on the table, close to the folder. "I thought you worked in an office," she said finally. "I did," I said. "Sometimes. Just not only there." The door opened again before she could reply. Nadine stepped inside holding an old wooden box against her chest. The box had been in my father's closet for years. I recognized the dark stain along one corner and the faint smell of camphor before she placed it on the table. "I found this after your letter," Nadine said. She opened the lid. Inside was a photograph of me at 20, standing in borrowed training gear with my hair pulled back and my face sunburned. Beneath it sat a brass challenge coin I had mailed home after my first major assignment. I had sent it without a note. I had not known what to say. Nadine lifted the coin and placed it in my palm. The brass was cold. The photograph's edges were soft from years inside the box. For a moment, none of us spoke. Then Maris reached across the table and touched the corner of the old picture. "I never knew," she said. I closed my fingers around the coin. "That is true," I replied. "But now you can." Nadine kept one hand on the wooden box after she gave me the challenge coin. The kitchen had gone quiet in a way that did not feel empty. Maris sat across from me, looking at the old photograph. I turned the coin over in my palm, tracing the worn edge with my thumb. My father had held that coin once. That thought stayed with me. Nadine reached beneath the photograph and lifted a folded piece of paper. It had been folded into quarters so many times that the creases had softened. The paper was thin and yellowed around the edges. "I did not know this was in there," she said. She handed it to me. I unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was my father's. Blocky. Heavy. The same handwriting he used on tool drawers in the garage, on old invoices, and on the masking tape labels he stuck to jars of bolts. There were only 7 words. My Taryn. The girl who carries the hard things. For a moment, I could not hear anything else. The sauce had cooled in its pot. Lark's voice drifted faintly from upstairs as she read to herself. Somewhere outside, a car door closed and an engine started. But those 7 words filled the whole room. Maris leaned closer. "Dad wrote that." I nodded. Nadine sat down slowly beside the box. "I thought he was just trying to encourage you," she said. "When you told us about that training program, when he said the hard jobs counted, I thought he was trying to make you feel better because I had upset you." I looked at the paper again. "He was not making me feel better," I said. "He was telling me what he saw." Nadine pressed her lips together. "I did not understand him," she said. "My father had never been easy to understand if you expected words to do all the work. He believed in showing up. He believed in fixing what could be fixed. He believed that a person's choices told you more than their explanations. He never asked me for stories after I left home. That had hurt me for a long time. Whenever I came back from training or an assignment, he would ask whether I was eating enough. He would ask whether my car needed new tires. He would ask whether Lark had started sleeping through the night after she was born. But he never asked what I had seen. He never asked where I had been. I used to think that meant he did not want to know." Sitting at my kitchen table with his handwriting in front of me, I understood something different. He had not asked because he respected the silence. He knew there were parts of my life I could not explain. He knew there were things a person might carry without wanting to set them on a family table between the mashed potatoes and the pie. He had not needed the details to understand me. He had watched me in that cold garage when I was 8 years old. He had watched me hold a flashlight steady until my hands went numb. He had watched me return every Saturday, even when I could have stayed inside with my mother and sister. He knew I did not leave when work got difficult. He knew I carried what was placed in my hands. I spent so long waiting for someone to see me that I missed the fact that my father had seen me before I knew how to explain myself. Maris wiped at her eyes with the heel of her hand. "I wish I had known," she said. "You could have asked," I replied. She nodded. "I know." There was no defense in her voice. No explanation about being young or distracted or married to Grant. Just the plain shape of the truth. Nadine touched the top of the box. "Your father kept every picture you sent," she said. "Every card. Every scrap of paper. He never told me why." "He did not have to," I said. That evening, after Maris left and Lark was asleep, I drove to Port Linden Cemetery. The rain had stopped, but the ground was still wet. My boots sank slightly into the grass as I followed the narrow path between the markers. A cold wind moved through the bare branches overhead, making them knock together in soft, dry sounds. My father's stone sat beneath an old maple tree. Owen Bellamy, 1958 to 2021 husband. Father. Builder. I stood in front of it for a while without speaking. The challenge coin was in my coat pocket. I took it out and held it in my palm. The metal was cold enough to sting. I did it, I said finally. My voice sounded smaller outside than it had in my kitchen. I stopped letting them tell the story for me. The wind moved through the trees again. I crouched and set the coin against the base of the marker for a moment. Then I picked it back up. I was not leaving it there. It belonged with me now. I thought you did not see me, I said. I was wrong about that. The paper Nadine had given me was folded inside my jacket pocket. When the wind caught the edge of it, I pressed my hand over the fabric to keep it still. I did not make promises beside his grave. I did not say everything would be fixed. Grant had begun to understand the damage he caused, but that did not restore 9 years of trust. Maris had started asking questions, but asking was only the first step. Nadine had finally looked at the numbers, but numbers did not erase the silence that had made them necessary. They would have the chance to repair what they had broken. They would not get to repair it with speeches. Trust would return only through choices. Through the next dinner. The next joke someone refused to make. The next bill discussed openly. The next moment when someone asked instead of assumed. I stood, brushed damp grass from my knees, and looked once more at my father's name. Then I walked back to my car. The coin stayed warm in my pocket all the way home. The dinner happened 48 days after Grant dragged me onto the mat. Maris called it a small family meal, which meant 14 adults, 7 children, 3 folding tables, and enough food to feed twice that number. She had hung string lights across the backyard in Briar Glen, and by the time Lark and I arrived, the grass had grown in thicker than it had been in late March. There was no grappling mat. That was the first thing I noticed. The space where Grant had unrolled it was empty except for 2 children chasing each other with glow sticks. A long table ran across the lawn instead, covered with mismatched plates, bowls of salad, grilled chicken, corn, and a peach cobbler still warm beneath foil. The air smelled like night grass and charcoal. Lark carried the old photograph from Owen's box under one arm. She had asked to bring it herself. In the picture, I was 20 years old, standing in training gear with my face sunburned and my hair pulled tight behind my head. Maris met us at the gate. "You made it," she said. "We said we would." She looked at Lark. "Is that the picture Grandma gave you?" Lark nodded. "That is my mom when she did important stuff." Maris smiled, but her eyes held steady this time. "She still does," she said. Inside the back door, I saw the frame. Grant had hung Bram Kessler's letter on the wall beside the patio entrance. It was simple black wood, no decorative plaque, no oversized title, no attempt to turn it into something flashy. The words were visible through the glass. Taryn Bellamy served with uncommon discipline, judgment, and restraint. Grant had asked my permission 2 weeks earlier. He had sent a text instead of calling. "Would it be okay if I framed Bram's letter? Not to make a show of it. I want people in my house to know what I failed to understand." I had read the message twice before answering. "Yes. Keep it simple." He had. That mattered. Lark ran toward her cousins, holding the photo in both hands. I watched her stop beside them near the swing set. "That is my mom," she told a boy from Maris's side of the family. "She does the hard jobs." The words reached me clearly. For a second, I had to look away. My father's sentence had traveled through almost 30 years and landed in my daughter's voice. It did not sound like a burden there. It sounded like a fact. Grant came out from the patio carrying a tray of burgers. He set it down near the grill, then looked toward the driveway. A neighbor I had not met before was walking through the gate with a bottle of wine. "Sorry I am late," the man said. "Traffic was awful." Grant stepped forward to greet him. Then he looked over at me. "This is my sister-in-law, Taryn Bellamy," he said. His voice was clear enough for the table to hear. She spent her life doing hard things quietly. I was wrong not to see it. Nobody laughed. Nobody needed to. The neighbor shook my hand. "It is good to meet you." "It is good to meet you too," I said. Grant returned to the grill. He did not wait for approval. He did not look around to see whether anyone had noticed his apology. That was another thing that mattered. Later, while everyone ate, my phone vibrated against the table. The message was from Mateo. "I have been at a lot of barbecues. I have seen plenty of people perform. Your family has something rare in that yard. Make sure they learn how to treat it like it is rare." I read it once, then slipped my phone into my pocket. Nadine sat beside me. She had brought deviled eggs and a bouquet of grocery store flowers that now rested in a glass jar at the center of the table. She did not mention the letter, the payment ledger, or the box from Owen's closet. Instead, she reached over and placed her hand on mine. Her palm was warm. She left it there while someone at the other end of the table told a story about a broken lawnmower. It was the kind of gesture my mother understood better than speeches. She had apologized already. Tonight, she was choosing to stay close enough that I could feel it. Lark fell asleep before dessert. She had been fighting it for 10 minutes, blinking slowly with her head leaning against the chair. Grant noticed before anyone else did. He went inside without announcing it, came back with a blue fleece blanket, and laid it over her shoulders. He tucked the edge beneath her elbow so it would not slide off. I watched him do it. 6 weeks earlier, he had looked at my daughter and seen part of a joke he could make about me. Now he saw that she was cold. Repair was not a speech. It was 100 small corrections made when nobody was keeping score. After dinner, Maris and I carried dishes inside. The kitchen filled with steam from the sink and the sound of plates touching each other under running water. She handed me a glass bowl. "I used to think you did not need anyone," she said. I made that easy to believe. That does not make it true. I rinsed the bowl and placed it in the drying rack. "No," I said. "It does not." For the next few minutes, we washed dishes without forcing conversation. We did not compete for attention. We did not pretend nothing had happened. We just stood side by side, passing plates and drying forks. It felt ordinary. That was what made it important. When I looked through the kitchen window, I could see the backyard under the warm string lights. Nadine sat near Lark with one hand resting on the blue blanket. Grant stood by the grill, listening while one of his friends spoke. He was not performing. Maris was laughing softly at something one of the children said. I had spent years believing I would need to burn the whole structure down before anyone could see the truth. I did not. I only had to stop holding it up. Peace did not arrive like a victory. It arrived like a room where I no longer had to make myself smaller to be allowed inside. My father had been right about hard work. It still counted when nobody asked who did it. But he had never told me to disappear while doing it.